In July 2023, ESPN premiered a documentary on auto racing legend Sir Jackie Stewart. The documentary looked at Stewart's life, from his early years as a struggling schoolboy to his rise as the premier driver on the F1 circuit. After he retired following the 1973 F1 season, Stewart became a TV racing commentator and spokesperson for several companies, including the Ford Motor Company. As of July 2023, Sir Jackie's main passion is finding a cure for Alzheimer's, which his wife Helen has suffered from for nearly 10 years. Earlier in 2023, Sir Jackie suffered a health scare of his own, a mini-stroke which, according to the British newspaper The Mirror, has left him fearful of an Alzheimer's diagnosis in himself. But Sir Jackie hasn't been passive with regard to Alzheimer's. In 2016, he founded Race Against Dementia, an organization dedicated to finding a cure. A link to the organization's website appears in the description below. 40 years ago, in 1983, I had the opportunity, along with my late broadcast partner Larry Kotler, to interview Jackie Stewart by phone from his home in Switzerland. He had retired from F1 racing 10 years prior in 1973 and was enjoying life as a racing commentator and commercial spokesperson. But before the interview, just a quick plug for this channel, where sports notables of the past can be heard again. Notables such as Muhammad Ali, Gale Sayers, Dick Enberg, Harry Carey, Stan Musial, Len Dawson, and others as well. Please like and subscribe. Now, a 1983 interview with Jackie Stewart on Saturday's Sportsline Memories.
Now on WHO Saturday Sportsline, an outstanding race car driver in his own right, an outstanding television commentator on the great sport of auto racing, Jackie Stewart on WHO Saturday Sportsline, and he is with us live from the country of Switzerland. 282-5111 is our local line here in Des Moines. Our toll-free Watts line, 1-800-532-1111. Our long-distance line is area code 515-282-5120. Jackie, how about those Ford cars?
Well, they all seem to be going fairly well. No complications, I don't think.
Uh-huh. What got you interested in getting together with Ford and making those commercials?
Well, I had been with Ford Motor Company for a great many years while I was racing. In fact, I joined the company way back in 1964. And since then, I have been associated with the company, mostly in the early years, of course, with motorsport. In fact, I won all 3 of my world championships with Ford-powered cars, and 25 out of my 27 Grand Prix victories with the same power plant. So I really had a long-lasting relationship with the company, and when I retired from racing, I continued, and more specifically now I'm doing research and development in engineering for ride and handling, that's to say road holding basically, with the company, as well as doing commercials.
We're talking with Jackie Stewart on Saturday Sportsline. Our number's in Des Moines and surrounding suburbs. The number is 282-5111. Elsewhere in the state, the toll-free Watts line, 800-532-1111, which is free of charge to you. And outside the state, 515 is the area code, 282-5120, and out-of-state calls must be paid for in advance. Jackie, you got out of race car driving because of, racing safety, basically, all the dangers involved with auto racing. Let's talk about how that all developed. When did you finally decide that you'd had enough?
Well, I decided in the spring of 1973, which 10 years ago right now, of course. It wasn't really strictly because of the danger element. That, of course, was part of it. But I guess more than anything else, I was just tired. You know, Bjorn Borg retired from tennis recently, and I think I experienced the same sort of thing as Bjorn had. I basically was burned out. I had put so much time and effort into the sport for so many years, and I had been fairly successful at it. And I had won the World Championship a few times and done what was needed in the sport, for myself, that is. And I think really in the end, I was having more aggravation, more pain and suffering than I was getting pleasure and satisfaction. So that was one element. And then I suppose what you mentioned, and the element of safety and danger, I have a family and I have 2 sons, so I thought perhaps that they would like to see a little more of me, and the family unit is pretty important. So I did retire, but it was a very comfortable retirement. It wasn't enforced, it wasn't because of an accident, it wasn't because I was frightened to drive anymore, it was just because I'd had enough.
Jackie, how did you get interested in racing in the first place?
I was brought up in Scotland, as most people have recognized by the voice, in a wee village called Milton near Dumbarton in Scotland. I left school at a very early age of 15 years of age, having had a lot of trouble at school, basically with I think it was identified quite recently, funnily enough, as dyslexia, a learning disability. And I started to work as a motor mechanic, preparing cars for other people to drive. I got into enthusiast car market, and I started through that, and sooner or later one of the persons who owned one of those cars that I was preparing asked if I would like to have a drive in it myself, which of course I was very pleased to do, and I started from there.
We're talking with Jackie Stewart on WHO Saturday Sports Line, locally the number 282-5111, our toll-free Watts line 1-800-532-1111. Jackie, I've been impressed with your work, frankly, on the Indianapolis 500, which is replayed on same-day coverage around many ABC television stations, but there's one thing I'm wondering about. Sports Illustrated pointed it out on an article about the race day coverage. It says that actually what you folks do at ABC is to voice over the race. That is...
Yeah, you're quite right. The Speedway themselves, I don't think, want to have the race live. We would like, I know I would like very much to have the Indy 500 as a live telecast. Keep in mind that it's quite a long race, 500 miles. It can go on for 3 3/4 hours. So what ABC do is we, of course, tape the whole show with 23 cameras around the racetrack. Now, there's a lot of elements of that show which obviously are relatively boring. Other elements that we have to put in to not only entertain but educate our audience, because not everybody is a hardcore enthusiast of motorsport, and if I'm talking to uncle and auntie, for example, maybe they don't know as much about it as the real hardcore aficionado. Now, we've got to be educational and be able to give the people who haven't got such a deep knowledge of the sport a little insight into the intricacies of it. So therefore we have to pre-tape some of the stuff that may be interesting for them. Now, to incorporate all that within the show, what we do is some of the show is done live, the start of the show and the end of the show, the laps are live. That's taped and put in the can. But then the show is edited. From the time the race finishes until we go on the air, the show is cut and edited. And at that time, in this case, Jim McKay and Sam Posey are in the commentary position, and they're looking at the monitor, the same picture as is being seen in the viewers' homes. And they are doing commentary right there and then. But that's the first time that they are seeing that actual footage. They've never seen it before because obviously they can't look at all of the 23 monitors that are being taken around that racetrack during the event. So they're seeing that fresh. Of course, they do know what happened in the race. Now, in Race Central, I am doing live the comments that I'm making. In other words, as we go along, it comes to me, and that is what I call live. That's to say, as it goes out, I'm doing it live. It's not pre-recorded. But it's a delicate balance. I know it's open for criticism. ABC have been criticized several times before, but I don't really see another way of doing this practically, unless the 500 would like to see, the Indianapolis people would like to see it as a live show, but that, I'm afraid, is not ABC's judgment.
How do you feel as a racing commentator? Do you feel more comfortable behind the chair in front of a camera or behind a race car?
Well, I'm beginning to feel just as comfortable now in front of a camera with a microphone in my hand. It took quite a while. Keep in mind that as a race driver, you're interviewed a lot. You're being exposed to the media, the press, the electronic media with radio and television. And therefore you get used to being interviewed, so you get used to being filmed and televised. And of course you're always doing little promotional films or educational films or documentaries, so it's not a brand new experience. But to talk about it is more difficult because you have to do it succinctly. You have to do it in a very clear and understandable way to many people who don't know the sport very well. So it's not just as easy as it sounds. You've got to be able to use the English language fairly well. You've got to be colorful with your description, while at the same time not getting into such a frenzy that nobody can understand you, particularly if you're a Scotsman. So therefore, it's something that experience, I think, is important in.
Jackie, I want to touch back again with what you talked about, the broadcasting, the Indy 500. You said that the Speedway doesn't want it done live, and I guess my question is why not?
I think they might be concerned, as I understand it, they may be concerned that it would reduce the attendance at the Speedway. It would not be my opinion that would be the case. I think the Indy 500 is such an enormous event in Americana that I don't think it would stop people from going to the event. I'm sure they would like to see it again sometime later. If they were there, they would like to see the telecast. I think if they just blacked it out in the Indiana area and the immediate vicinity of the Speedway, then I think that would be quite sufficient. I think they would still see their 300, 350 or 400,000 people that come to that event because they want to be there Memorial Day.
Who are some of the top race drivers that you've seen throughout your career, not only behind the wheel but behind the microphone? Who do you judge to be the best?
Sam Posey is a very good commentator now. He's doing very well. Johnny Rutherford, I think, does a very good job. I noticed Dan Gurney did some the other day. Jody Scheckter has done some with ABC. He helped me at Monaco this year. James Hunt, another British ex-world champion, is doing it for the BBC in Britain. Of the American ones, let me think. I'm not too sure what of the stock car drivers are doing it now. But really, I think it needs an expert commentator to give those comments in. I know Bobby Unser's done it in the past. I think, I think you'll see any retired racing driver, like any retired tennis player, can give an insight into the game or to the race just that little bit more than the play-by-play commentator.
Jackie, what about the top racers you've seen in your period of time?
I think the best driver that I ever raced against was the late Jim Clark, a fellow Scot, a great favorite in America because he won the Indianapolis 500 in the mid-60s. He came to America and really left his mark over there, and he had won the World Championship too on a couple of occasions. Wonderfully smooth, calculated driver, very serious, very modest man, a farmer from the borders of Scotland. Great driver. Jochen Rindt, an Austrian driver, won the World Championship posthumously in 1970. My own teammate, Francois Sever, a young French, good-looking driver who sadly lost his life at the very end of 1973. Sterling Moss, of course, I never raced against, but was one of the great drivers. Fangio from Argentina, I never raced against, but saw. And of course, Mario Andretti is a great racing driver and won the World Championship, has won the Indy 500, the Daytona 500. He's done a lot. A.J. Foyt, he's won Le Mans, the 500s of Daytona, Indianapolis. Just a very versatile driver. Oh, there's a lot of drivers come to mind.
Jackie, we have a call for you. Good afternoon. You're on the air with Jackie Stewart.
Yes, Jackie. Last year, can you explain what happened to Kevin Coogan in that wreck at the start?
I wonder if you could repeat that.
Kevin Cogan had
this
some...
line here. I think I'm a far way away. Could you just repeat the question?
Okay, I'll go ahead and do that for you, Jackie. Last year, of course, Kevin Cogan had a little bit of a tough time getting started in the Indianapolis 500 and caused a little bit of a scene there at the start of the race. Could you explain for the listener what happened, in your opinion?
Well, there's still some dubiety about it, some doubt about it. Kevin feels that something broke on the car, which is perfectly feasible. If a right rear drive shaft broke, the car would pivot and drive into the right-hand side, which is a perfectly simple thing to do. Or, on the other hand, Kevin, just for a moment, was not paying attention. It's a big moment, the start of the Indy 500. And if Kevin had put all the power on, and these Indianapolis engines, even with full tanks, develop, let's say, more than 800 horsepower, and when that comes in, much as the same way as a speedboat, it doesn't come in straight. You just can't put your foot on the floor and expect the car to go straight. There's what you call torque power, and that sometimes changes the direction of the car just a wee bit. And there's a fairly common belief amongst these competitors that that's what happened, that Kevin, in the excitement of the moment, being in the front row of the grid for the world's greatest motor race, just that little moment was a bit too much for total concentration, and maybe he just veered a bit off and came in contact with AJ. But whether it was a mechanical failure is very difficult. We have difficulty doing what the aircraft business does in analyzing an accident afterwards as acutely as we perhaps could. So that's as much as I can tell you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you much for the call on WHO Saturday Sports Line. Jackie, you've been an advocate of safety in racing for a long, long time, especially at Indianapolis, and I saw a special little segment that you did during the race itself this year about safety at Indianapolis. It's not as safe as it could be, I guess.
Well, we've got to keep in mind that motor racing never will be safe. Every time you go to a race, on the back of your ticket it says motor racing can be dangerous, and you buy this ticket and enter at your own risk, for a very good reason, that when cars are in close company, it's the human that's controlling these machines. Errors do occur. Sometimes they're mechanical, sometimes they're by the drivers, sometimes it's oil on the racetrack, etc. Nevertheless, it's very dangerous. We have to try and keep up to date and do as many things to protect not only the drivers but spectators, but basically the sport in general. The future prosperity of the sport has to be protected by making it as safe for all as possible. So that was the point. I made that point at Indianapolis. Keep in mind that in that same piece I did say that Indianapolis had one of the best safety records of any racetrack in the world for the number of miles that traveled by the number of competitors over the years. It is remarkably good, but that doesn't mean to say it can't be better.
Jackie, another thing I was wondering about, there have been some limitations on engine boost at Indianapolis, so your top speeds on the straightaways are maybe 220, perhaps 230 miles an hour, and your average speeds are up around the 190s or 200s. I guess what I'm asking is that about the tops that you can go at Indianapolis and still be safe, or is there no limit?
Well, there's two different questions, really. It's certainly not as fast as can be achieved, but what, the problem with any high-speed accident that can happen at speeds of up 200 miles an hour plus, it really becomes an aircraft accident. That's as fast as any aircraft takes off at or lands at. And with all that fuel on board and all of these vehicles now being deformable structures, in other words, when they crash, they all fall apart. Many of those parts can go a great distance. So my personal belief, nothing to do with just safety, I mean a whole package, I believe that we could reduce the speeds at Indianapolis by a reasonably large amount and make motor racing every bit as entertaining and make it a great deal safer for drivers, officials, spectators alike. So I'm of the opinion that we should be reducing the speeds in any case. There's no real reason for these ridiculously high speeds. And from time to time, when big accidents do occur, it can eliminate life so very quickly. And I think that is quite unnecessary. I think we could give ourselves a little more chance of survival. The dynamics involved in a 200-mile-an-hour plus accident is absolutely enormous. Reduce that speed by 30 miles an hour, for example, and you would be surprised how much better chance you have of surviving it.
We're visiting with Jackie Stewart, a veteran race car driver, as well as a veteran broadcaster with the ABC. Also now represents the Ford Motor Company. 2825111 is our local number. Our statewide toll-free Watts line, 800-532-1111. And outside the state of Iowa, the area code 515-282-5120. And out-of-state calls must be paid for in advance. Another area in which we talk about injuries, Jackie, is really what's been happening with drivers of Indy cars, and we're talking about leg, ankle, and foot injuries. What can be done to halt those?
Well, my understanding of that is that we have to try and enclose a driver a little more completely within what I would call a safety capsule, survival capsule. And I think we could have a great deal more strength in that area, a sort of tubular construction within the car that would allow the driver just that little bit more chance of protection, particularly in the extremities. Many of the cars, the driver's legs and feet are beyond the front axles, and your shin bones run underneath the steering rack. And if a severe accident where the frontal impact is involved at all, the chances are you're going to get very severe foot, ankle, and lower leg injuries. Now, this also happens in Grand Prix racing. We have one of the Ferrari drivers still recovering from an accident that took place more than a year ago. Didier Pironi, who drives for Ferrari, was leading the World Championship last year when he had a very big accident. And frankly, his legs were just in a terrible state, and he's still having operations to this day to try and get himself back into racing. This is the tale that's been happening now for about 3 or 4 years. In Grand Prix racing, it's been happening longer than Indianapolis because the technique of construction of modern racing cars generally comes from Europe rather than starting in America. So the trends that we've had in Europe usually take 1 or 2 years to get over to the Indy cars. So unless they do something, I think you're going to see very many more foot, leg, and lower leg injuries.
Okay, let's take a call for you right now. Jackie from Des Moines. Good afternoon. You're on Saturday Sports Line.
Hello, Jackie.
Yes, sir.
The question I've got for you, I'm going to ask my question, then I'll hang up so I can hear your reply on my radio. I'm from the Midwest here, and we've got a lot of good sprint car drivers came out here, like Bobby Grimm and current guys like Doug Wolfgang and different fellows. But I keep hearing and reading in Speed Sport and in the news that the day of the good experienced sprint driver making it to Indy, if he doesn't have a lot of money to buy his way in, he's not going to make it. And that a lot of people that are getting into Indy nowadays aren't as experienced as they should be, but they've got a big bankroll, and that gets them in a car. I'll hang up and listen for your reply.
Okay, thank you much for the call. Go ahead, Jackie.
Okay, I did hear the question that time. I'm afraid it's the tale that's been going on for quite a long time in every form of motorsport. Indianapolis is the end of the rainbow, like in Grand Prix racing. That's what it is over here in Europe and South America. It's never an easy one to answer. At Indianapolis, however, there's a special case. It's a high-speed racetrack. Most of the sprint car drivers have been used to driving at lower speeds. Historically, in the past, the Indy drivers came from sprint car racing, from midgets, from dirt, to sprint cars on dirt or on hard top surface. And it was an ideal breeding ground. That has become less true in the recent years since the speeds have increased. The rear engine car has become more part and parcel, and a lot of road racing drivers have been coming in. But whether they're road racers or sprint car drivers developing into Indy cars, they've still got to get money. And what they've got to do is find sponsors who are prepared to back them. Now, it's true to say that if somebody is a good businessman rather than a good driver, maybe he could start getting himself a drive. But at the end of the day, there are precious few real good racing drivers around. And if there's somebody with real talent, he will be spotted. And he will be the person, if he's got someone to assist him, if he isn't very articulate, if he's not real good at business and coaxing people into backing them, let them get somebody to help them to do that. Because there are a lot of people now in America, particularly in sport, who like the idea of becoming associated with a shooting star, somebody who's going to make it big time. And of course that can sometimes be a relatively good investment. So therefore, you see it in the golf tour, you see it in the tennis tour, there's no reason at all why it can't be in the racing tracks as well. So I can see much more of that happening in the future, and if there are real good sprint drivers out there who want to go Indianapolis racing, what they've got to do, if they can't depend only on their talent, and if they are truly outstanding, believe me, they'll be recognized, picked up, and tried. Because, as I said to you before, in this whole world there aren't too many real top drivers.
Jackie, to get back to an earlier theme, the average speed for the race at Indianapolis now is about 155, 160 miles an hour. The qualifying speeds are what's going up, and when you're qualifying, there aren't any other cars out there to present a danger. So I guess my question to you is, why reduce the boost if the race speed tends to average out over a number of years, past 10 years?
Well, the average this year was 162 miles an hour, and it wasn't a record, but of course it was because of yellow flags, not because the cars are going that much slower. In the race there was quite a few laps in the high 190s, 197 mile an hour I saw a couple of times by Tom Sneva and by Al Unser in the closing laps, for example, and Young Jr. did that too. No, the speeds are still high, but keep in mind there's got to be pit stops in there. Then if there's an incident and a yellow flag period, these cars have got to go around behind the pace car, which may be traveling at no more than 80 to 90 miles an hour. So the average speed of 162 is not really representative of the speed still being achieved on the straight stretches and, of course, during the hot laps. So I don't think that the argument really stands. I think what I would like to see is better racing. We've had 2 great years of motor racing in the Indy 500. I can't complain at all. This year was a great race in my opinion, and last year was a fantastic finish. So really racing has been good, but I would still like to see these speeds reduced in the interest of making sure that we have our house in order in auto racing for the future, because if big companies are going to become involved and people are going to stay with the sport, they have to see the people involved in it as being responsible and looking towards making sure that it's going to be good and safe for the future.
Jackie, you only have about 30 seconds. What did you think about the situation with the Unsers this year at Indy, what they tried to pull?
Well, I was amused by it. I have to take my hat off to Al Jr. having the guts to stand up and say that's exactly what he was trying to do. I was giving them the benefit of the doubt while I was doing the telecast because I hadn't spoken to him about it. But anyway, I think he's going to turn out to be one of the great American drivers. I'm really enthused about his talent.
Jackie Stewart on WHO Saturday Sports Line. Thank you much for joining us live from the country of Switzerland. We're coming up on a sports update at 1:45 in the afternoon. After the sports update, we'll be joined by Joe Chapman talking about the Iowa Amateur Golf Tournament. After that, a special interview with Cal Griffith, Part 1.